Melee combat in Barony can be a little bit tough sometimes. And perhaps you don't exactly understand how to perfect this melee combat. And if you are one of these people, first of all, and second, don't even worry, because I got you. In this video, I'm gonna briefly explain how each type of melee weapon differs from the others before discussing the 3 major styles of melee combat in Barony, ranked from what I personally think is the easiest to the most complicated. I'll highlight each style's strengths and weaknesses, as well as which situations are best suited for each one and how to adapt to them. Hopefully by the end of this video, you'll know the basics to perfect the art of melee combat in Barony and cut down your enemies up close and personally. Alright, enough talk, let's get into this and start with the melee weapons themselves. Barony has 5 different types of melee weapons to choose from, and most classes will choose to specialize in at least one of these types. I won't go into too much detail about them, but I'll explain the most important details and differences between each of them. So each melee weapon has their own unique effects. Increasing your level in any weapon skill will allow it to deal more damage, and you'll be able to use a weapon for longer before it breaks. Maxing a weapon skill will make that weapon type unbreakable, further increase its damage, and give it a special effect for fully charged strikes. When using a charged strike with max level in that weapon type, swords will bleed enemies on hit, polearms will knock enemies back, axes will slow enemies, maces have a chance to paralyze enemies, and unarmed attacks will knock enemies away as well as paralyze them if hit from behind with a stealth attack. They all have the same melee range, except for, I guess, the whip, which I don't count here. You don't have to worry about equipping a certain weapon just to reach a little bit farther. The most important thing that you need to know is that each enemy in Barony has their own set of weaknesses and resistances, which you can research in the game's compendium to know what types of damage will pack the biggest punch. If you're struggling to deal effective damage to a certain enemy, it's probably because of their resistances, and you should check out their entry to see what might actually work best. And that's really all I want to cover for the weapons, so let's discuss the first and probably the simplest style of melee combat in Barony: blocking. Blocking is very simple, and all you need to do it is a shield or a torch. When holding a shield, torch, or lantern in your offhand and holding the block button, you'll block with it. No surprise there. While blocking, you gain additional defense, and this bonus will increase as you level your blocking skill, going from about 5 more armor at level 0 to 25 more armor at max level, as well as grant passive increased armor just by holding the shield based on your blocking skill. You should view your block as less of an actual shield in front of you, and more like a protective bubble that goes around you. Since blocking just increases your armor stat, it doesn't matter what direction the damage is coming from, you can still block it no problem as long as you have enough armor. Leveling blocking is very important and equally as simple. Just block incoming attacks with your shield and you'll level your blocking skill over time. You can only gain 1 level of blocking per enemy though, and it doesn't exactly guarantee it with every successful block, but you can increase your chances with a few different methods. The most common method is to block an attack from an enemy, hit them, then block their next attack. If you land this combo a few times successfully, your chance to gain a blocking skill drastically increases and is almost guaranteed after the 3rd hit. Another easy way to level up your blocking is to what I call parry an attack, or put up your shield right before the attack lands. Lower your shield, then raise it right as they're about to swing so that you have less of a window to block. This will also increase your chances of leveling your blocking skill, and it's a lot better in my opinion than just holding the block button, because they typically won't get so many hits on your shield before it levels, meaning you'll be able to keep your shield for a lot longer before it breaks. Early on, it's a good idea to level blocking on enemies that are too weak to hurt you through your block, as high blocking skills increase your defense by a drastic amount in the long run. Though incredibly powerful in many situations, blocking has a few glaring weaknesses or situations where it won't be as effective. Special arrows such as fire or piercing will pierce through your shield, and magic attacks will not be affected by your shield whatsoever. Although you can reduce the damage from axes with your block, they will always deal a minimum of 1 damage, and bugbears with axes will deal about 2 damage minimum. Mirror shields can block magic attacks, but they're incredibly fragile and will break super quickly if you try to block anything else with it. Long story short, blocking combat is extremely simple and effective, but shields do have a few big weaknesses, and if you don't know how to play around this, you're gonna be in for a rough time later on. Now on to sneaking. Stealth is all about staying hidden and striking at the right time to deal some insane damage. Giving enemies back shots while undetected will deal more damage based on your stealth skill. Enemies will have a harder time seeing and detecting you the higher this skill is as well, and this is further increased when you're sneaking. Being in the dark is important for stealth, since light sources make you more easily detectable. Enemies are harder to attack with stealth if they are in groups near any lights or if they're in tight spaces like tunnels and corridors. A smart stealth player will know when these situations are unfair favorable, and more importantly, how they can get out of these situations with their tools that they have to give them the advantage that they need. For example, you can take torches off of walls and campfires to make an area dark, and you can use ranged attacks or let yourself be noticed and run into the dark to lure enemies into a more favorable area to assassinate them. Assassinating the right target in a group at the right time is very crucial to ensure that you will not be punished for trying to do stealth combat against multiple enemies at once. With stealth mastered, you can obliterate enemies from behind so quickly and quietly that some other enemies might not even notice nearby. The insane bonus damage paired with the ability to hide in plain sight gives you massive survivability and opens up unique opportunities to swiftly and easily defeat opponents who would otherwise be challenging to defeat head-on. But stealth does have some downsides, of course. Being cornered can be very problematic if you lack defense, which is very common for stealthy players, as it's not exactly a good idea to wear tanky armor to slow you down. If an enemy is using a ranged or magical weapon, they can sometimes attack you as you're backing away if your attack doesn't manage to kill them first. Like I mentioned earlier, groups of enemies are much harder to take down with stealth, and you can more easily be detected while trying to assassinate and be put into a bad situation. Stealth is very strong and offers massive boosts to damage, but requires smart use of your environment and tools at your disposal to use effectively. And lastly, we have what is probably the most powerful form of melee combat: kiting. Probably the strongest but most difficult style of melee combat, kiting allows you to win otherwise impossible fights, and if you do it just right, you can beat enemies without even taking a single hit. Kiting isn't tied to any specific in-game skill, so to speak, but rather the player's skill and speed, and their knowledge of melee range. To kite an enemy, simply hit them from as far away as you can with melee, then quickly turn back to get out of their range. Turn back and hit the enemy again when safe to do so, and then just repeat this process until they're dead. Speed is key for this strategy, so it's important to drop any items and equipment that might be weighing you down. The entire goal for this style of combat is to avoid getting hit, so it's not very necessary to wear heavy armor. Kiting is extremely effective against slower, tougher enemies. Enemies like skeletons, trolls, slimes, and ghouls can be fought with this tactic without ever taking a single hit in return. Taking down enemies that you would otherwise have to try and avoid or are too difficult to kill head on will allow you to accumulate far more experience and makes the rest of your game much easier if you do this early on. However, despite being so powerful, kiting has some incredibly big downsides. First and foremost, kiting requires a lot of open space to use effectively. You can still kite in a small enclosed area, but this can be difficult and kind of opens up the opportunity to be trapped or cornered. If you aren't much faster than the enemy you're trying to kite, you'll have trouble avoiding damage when attacking. Lastly, and most importantly, kiting is very difficult for a new player to learn and understand when first attempting. Learning how to turn quickly and knowing the range of your melee attacks is super important when kiting, so you have to be willing to practice this technique and expect some failure if you're new or inexperienced. But don't worry, you'll eventually get it down, and trust me, it's going to pay off if you learn how to kite in this game. And yeah, that's just about everything you need to know about melee combat in Barony. If you guys would like another guide like this for something like ranged or magic combat or some other kind of gimmick in Barony, just let me know, and I'll try to do my best to guide you guys. I really like doing this sort of thing, and you guys seem to like it too, so I'm happy to help. Comment below if these kinds of guides are what you'd like, and if there's something in particular that you would like to see in a guide. I like to take a lot of feedback from my comment section, and I use it as inspiration for what to make for these guide videos, so your support and feedback means a lot to me. Lastly, I've made several other beginner guides for players who are new to Barony. I'll put a few of those links in my description, as well as a playlist of all my Barony videos and guides if you're interested. Okay, that's about it. Farewell, homies.